Gruesome Magazine.
Hello, once again. I'm your host, Doc Rodden, and this is Gruesome Magazine, where we review the very latest in streaming and theatrical horror films. Each week, my Gruesome Magazine Grue-Crew will take a look at very spooky, scary, and gory genre offerings. Tonight, we're reviewing The Devil's Bath, available streaming on Shudder, beginning June 28th, 2024. Sounds silly, but it's absolutely serious.
Not silly.
It's as bad as...
I don't think anyone is serious that any
as,
part of this movie is silly.
I agree.
There's nothing silly about this movie after you get past the title. And what the title means is not is about as far from silly as you get. But anyway, we'll get to all that. But first, let me introduce my crew, starting off with Crystal Cleveland, the Living Dead Girl. How you doing?
Good. So I had one of those like baby dolls, and I was gonna be like, oh, that I couldn't find it.
No, don't.
Sorry. Yeah.
That was weird. That was weird.
Well, but that's what she did. I should have had a wax baby, and then had it melting
and scream and run out.
Which is
all right. Also joining us this week is award-winning filmmaker.
Oh no,
G.
More.
To prepare for this review, it's all folks. This is all folks. To prepare for this review, I took a bath.
Did you?
Oh no.
Which is normal every day. So it's just same thing I do every day.
Oh,
did you take a bath or did you take a shower? Technically.
Well, yeah, I didn't really take a bath.
Yeah. See, we say take a bath,
but you know what?
That's not what
nobody in this movie really took a bath or shower.
It's not really about that. It's not really about that. It means something entirely different.
There's no rubber duckies anywhere in this film, and I'm disappointed.
No rubber duckies. Oh
yeah,
gosh, I don't even know where to take all this, but all right. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you our first impression of the film. That first impression will be spoiler free, and then we're going to dive into the discussion about the film. We'll get into some spoilers and stuff, and then we'll wrap things up with our score 1 to 5 and our favorite scene. And of course, we hope you enjoy not only this review, but many others that we have on the site. And if you do, please hit the like, subscribe, share with a friend buttons. Each click will help us find more horror fans just like you.
Just like you.
All right, let's take a look at the card and get things going. Kaboom. All right, The Devil's Bath. Available streaming on Shudder beginning at June 28, 2024. The synopsis is, in 1750 Austria, a deeply religious woman named Agnes and just married her beloved, but her mind and heart soon grow heavy as her life becomes a long list of chores and expectations. Welcome to the real world. You're adulting. All right. Today after day, she is increasingly trapped in a murky and lonely path leading to evil thoughts. Evil thoughts, she says. Until the possibility of committing a shocking act of violence seems like the only way out of her inner prison, giving a voice to the invisible and unheard women of a rural past. The Devil's Bath is based on historical court records about the shocking, hitherto unexplored chapter of European history. Wow, I need to take a breath. That was a lot. All right, written and directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala. The cast includes Anja Plage, David Shade, and Maria Hofstadter. I got 50% on that. All right.
Yeah.
Let's find out what our first impressions were, or are even. Christopher G. Moore, start us off.
I will say that Devil's Bath, I was bathed in boredom. I'll say that much. It's beautifully shot, and I'll say it's well acted.
Oh yeah.
But this is the most drawn out film I have seen in a very long time. They just go very long on shots, and sometimes it's really wide, beautiful shots for long periods of time. And I understand, I didn't know anything about this film before I watched it, and they have like a little thing at the end that kind of tells the history about it based on historical events of how back in the day, how people were so, how suicide was
suicide by proxy,
and how, because of suicide and religion, and how people were afraid to commit suicide and that kind of thing. This is a really extreme, drawn out account to fulfill that, or to give an idea of it. Granted, you do feel like you've been transported to that time period, but the movie's like 2 hours, close to 2 hours or whatever, and I was bored to tears just 30 minutes in, because it's like nothing really happens. And I will say this was a hard film to really call a horror film. It's about horrific time periods and the horrific things that people did to people, but I'd really be hard pressed to call it a horror film per se. It's more about the horrors of that time. And then there's a moment where without giving too much away, where they show how they treated people back then, which is horrific in its own way. And I don't know. I guess I kept thinking, well, maybe something spooky or something creepy or something bigger is going to happen. And I was confused throughout most of it, because it doesn't really, it's very, for such a long drawn out movie, it's very simplistic in what it's trying to portray. It's more about portraying that time period and how the people are affected, as opposed to being that big of a story or anything. So I kept thinking maybe something folk horror, something Midsommar is going to happen, and nothing does. And then it feels like a Lars von Trier film, if you ever seen any of his films, which I hate his films, because a lot of his films are very misogynistic and putting women in really horrible situations. And the woman in this film, you feel really bad for her, because nobody really treats her with any kind of respect or care. I think this film is the pacing is slow and drawn out, and it's really hard to sort of stay focused on everything, because it's such a dreary, miserable story. The characters are miserable. And so sadly, I don't think the visuals or the acting can save the extremely slow pacing. I mean, there's a part where she's treading through mud, and I felt like I was treading through mud just trying to get to this film, because I kept looking at my watch like, is this film over yet? Is it over yet? Please, something happen. I want this to be over with. So the Devil's Bath is definitely not anything I want to dip my toes in ever again.
Oh, nice. I like that. Crystal, you're up next. What was your first impression of The Devil's Bath?
Okay, well, this movie is, on the one hand, it's phenomenal. It is so well made, well shot, well acted. It is really a lovely, beautiful film, but it's definitely not for me. Oh, no, this film is like the opposite of stuff I like to watch. Okay, like I get it. They're showing you a slice of life for this woman, how women were treated in Austria. Technically, I think this is based on a true account of a woman, I think from 1704, not 1750, which is fine, whatever, change the times. But yeah, this was a thing. And so it's cool what they're doing, but it's just not something I'm interested in. It's not something that I find entertaining. And it was boring for me, quite frankly. Like, I just, but I cannot deny that it's a beautiful, well-made film. And I think for people who enjoy this kind of stuff, this artsy fartsy kind of stuff, I think you'll love it. I think Jeff would love this film. I think this is that film. If you like that stuff, you'll probably love this. I would not recommend this to people, because typically I have a little bit of lowbrow taste and, in more traditional horror, and this is not that. Okay. I appreciated how they showed the relationship between wife and the husband. And it's, they definitely did a lot of show and not tell. I mean, obviously, in regard to the husband, I mean, we all know what was happening there. It really plays into the fact of like, in that time, if you weren't going to have children, if you weren't a woman who could get pregnant or have children, then you were like pretty much worthless, some of it's triggering big time. Like it's pretty triggering. It's much worse than the coffee table in that regard. Coffee table has that one. This is much more triggering in many aspects. Mental health, the things with the children, it's just so many different things. And I think that they were trying to use the shock value of those things to, enhance the story. And I guess, but not for someone like me, not for normal horror movie lovers. This is for those people that are like, I like elevated horror, which is all well and good. It's just not my thing. So that's it.
That's it. Yeah, I would argue this isn't really a horror film. I was kind of surprised by how so straightforward drama this is. It is super depressing film. It is actually about depression, and if its purpose is to communicate that depression, it succeeds in that respect, because holy crap. But at the same time, even in regards to how well it's made, I mean, it does look, it's exquisite. The locations, the transporting you back to that time, the clothes they're wearing, and all that. I mean, it's remarkable. But the story itself is so stretched that it couldn't capture my attention. It couldn't capture my imagination. I was having a hard time following the full part of it, because I think it's probably geared more toward a female audience. And I think that's fair to say, because it's a certain type of, it's basically, we watch this character, Agnes, as she basically spirals into deep depression. I mean, seriously deep depression, but it also has the mix of this, of religion into it, a lot of religion. And she's very religious, and it's, of course, suicide is, you go to hell, right? And that, which is almost kind of, I grew up Catholic, so that's the same thing there too. And there was an alternative, and that's really about what this film is. And at one point, they actually say that she's being consumed by the devil's bath, which is a reference to this just deep depression and kind of vanishing in under it all. So it's very, very exhausting in that way. But not in an entertaining. I mean, this isn't a very entertaining film in any respect, regardless of how well it's made and it's a labor to get through it. It's a chore, and for many, I think they'll get rewarded for it. However, that wasn't me. I just was like beside myself in boredom. This movie. It might have been, I thought it was an hour and a half, but it is 2 hours, but it felt like 4. I didn't like it as a horror film by any stretch of the imagination. And I think a majority of horror fans are going to feel the same way. I'm actually surprised that it's even being put on Shudder. I still don't think it's I really find it hard.
I see it as a horror film. I see it as a horror film. I mean, it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying.
Well, there are horrifying aspects, yeah, but
they chop off her head, and
we're in spoilers, by the way.
And and I mean, the singing and then there are definitely horror elements. It would be a drama first, for sure.
And we get the elements of the lady at first, right? At the
I think. Well, to me, I mean, granted, I usually don't like to watch movies where I feel like I need to watch Airplane.
You need to take up the devil's bath.
Yes.
I need to watch
actually,
something
I was going to say that, God.
funny or something after, because as someone that deals with my own issues with depression and anxiety, and granted, it's okay if you have characters, but this film is so dreary and miserable, and you feel like nobody's. And then, but at the same time, I think the one thing that I do find interesting, and I don't know how historical that, I was actually trying to research it before we were reviewing it, how historical it is, because of how you have these characters that they're suicidal, so they have to kill some young person or whatever, and then ask for forgiveness, and then they kill them, and then they like drink their blood, and
That was weird.
Yeah.
if
That
you
was
chop
weird.
off, if
See,
you chop
that's
off
what
their,
I'm saying. Yeah.
if you chop off their fingers or toes and you keep it, it gives you good luck. So it's almost like,
Oh, that's what that was.
and
Okay, I
so
didn't understand
because
that at
yeah,
all.
because again, that was very. It didn't really explain like why. I mean, why did her brother give her a severed finger? And then they're like, oh crap! You find out that they just leave the bodies out there, and then people will come, and then like they're drinking their blood, and so that was felt very folk horror ish.
It did. Yep. I
And
agree
if
with
it's
that.
based on a real thing, crap. I
Yeah.
can't imagine where. And so you have moments like that are kind of like, that feels like it could be in some kind of folk horror film, but I almost feel like I wish. I think because they're so trying to stay. I don't know how true they are to those stories and stuff, or to that. Although
Well,
I'll say, Crystal, it's not a slice of life; it's a whole loaf of bread of life, because
Well, yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
it's so drawn out.
God.
But yeah,
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, they certainly go to lengths not to sensationalize it, right? They
Yeah.
treat the message, what the point, the message that they're trying to convey, they treat it with a lot of respect, and and it comes across that way. It feels very what's the word? I'm like, authentic is kind of the word I want to, but not necessarily that. It just, it doesn't
Historically
feel
accurate.
yeah, something like that. Yeah. I mean, it feels. But I was thinking what the message they're trying to go. It just feels like. I respect that part, but as a film to enjoy, it's really challenging. It'll challenge you because it's just it beats you over the head with
Yeah, and
this
it's.
being so sad.
I think some people
sad
will
and
like
dreary.
it though.
I mean, I mean, it
Sure.
is. It. I mean, if anybody's dealt with being in relationships that don't work and those such, I mean, that there's a scene where it's, I guess, their wedding night, and he's all drunk and stuff, and she wants him to have sex with her because she wants to have a baby, and he's just doesn't want to see her face and jacks off behind her.
That, right? You do understand what the deal is with him.
He's gay, right?
Gay.
Well,
Gay.
yeah, I know that.
Like,
I know that. But it's like when you
like,
and then you have a character who's like keeps talking about having babies. It's like, I was like, man, there's so many like. You just feel bad to situate because everybody's treating her like crap, and she just becomes more disconnected.
This is why
with everything, and
why it's more important with the time, because let's be real.
Yeah,
it would always be blamed on the woman if she couldn't get pregnant. It was never the guy's fault. Okay. So like you see, like as more time goes on, of course, they just don't respect her because for one, she doesn't fit in as well because she's from a different town or whatever they call them there. So like she's coming into this life.
Because she's even more religious than they are. So
yeah.
And then they even say like one of the examples of what you're talking about is like, if you fail to cook a meal for your husband, well, you'll go to hell. I mean, it's something like that, right?
So ridiculous.
And they have that whole thing about the fish,
Yeah, but then
feels so weird.
But then as it went along, I wasn't sure because she went off to the other area where she was sort of doing what seemed like prayers, but then I kept thinking, is she doing? Because the butterfly stuff. I mean, there's like so many things that didn't make sense to me, and maybe it's that specific culture or historical type stuff. But because then
they're Christian, but they're very superstitious, like crazy superstitious. I've never seen a Christian religion quite so superstitious because like everything, like the finger, like this. So I do think they're like the freaking, what is it? The skull that they find in the river.
Put it back.
Yeah. It's like, okay, God bless.
But then the kids have it later and they're pulling the teeth out of it. So it's like, what?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. And let's give our score 1 to 5 and our favorite scene. And Christopher G. Moore, you're up first. He says.
I think this is a film that's hard for me to rate because usually I'll give ratings higher for films today based on visuals, but because I was just so like Crystal, this is not my film bunny stretch of the imagination at all. This feels like if you took if it's like The Witch, but you took all the interesting stuff out.
Yeah.
But I hate to say it, but I've given this a 2.25.
Okay.
Generous.
Well,
Oh,
but
I'm gonna give it a different score.
but I will say that
separate.
if it didn't have the visuals and the acting, it's still great. So you have 2/3 of that, but the other third. So I'll just give it based on the visuals and acting. As for favorite scene, I will have to say I don't know, because we're already in spoiler, but I'll say like when she starts singing and the little girl sings along with her.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, yes.
That was haunting and heartbreaking because
that's what I was saying. That's horrible.
You don't know, you know what's about to happen, and then you're thinking, well, in America that maybe they would stop.
No, they would not.
Maybe for a moment it's like, well, maybe everybody will start
committed.
singing like a Coca-Cola commercial and they'll stop.
I'd like
But-
to teach.
Yeah, but I found that. But then you see the little girl later, and she's like, "We're drinking blood."
They paid for the blood too. They had to pay for it. They didn't get it
I was
free.
like, man, I'm glad we, as much as stuff is even screwed up now, it was so much worse back in the day. But
That's
yeah,
true.
I will have to say that scene was very haunting and heartbreaking at the same time. So
Okay, very good. Crystal, your score for everything.
Okay, I'm gonna say this. I'm giving this a 3, and let me preface this by saying I will never watch this film again, and I will never recommend this film. However, I think it has a place, and I think it has an audience, and I think it's well made. And I didn't hate any of it. I just don't like that sort of entertainment. So, okay, I mean, I don't like it. There was one scene particularly that triggered me. And I don't usually get triggered, but I was like, really? I feel like at some points they were just trying to make something out of nothing, but it didn't push me too far. So they got lucky there. I will say, I think my favorite scene is honestly, I think the biggest issue with her is she knew she was never going to have kids. And I think that is honestly her. I think because she was really like, this woman was like 30 years old. Okay. She's not young. So I feel like a lot of the psychosis or anything that would have happened before would have already had manifested, but she clearly got driven to that based on her new lifestyle. And I think she's probably one of those women that always wanted to have kids. And then you could tell, like, when she finds the baby. So when she gets that wax baby and then it melts, it was like, that was really sad. And then just you hear the baby crying and stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's too bad. So I liked the wax melting baby. I was actually wondering what it was made out of anyway. I was like, that looks like a good baby for the 1700s. Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, I'm going to be unfortunately less forgiving. I'm going to go to 2. I mean, yes, the film's well made, but as tackling it as a horror film and films that we review here, and the interest in seeing it, not only will I not watch this again, I kind of wish I'd never seen it in the first place, and I've never felt that way about it.
Oh, wow.
I really wish I hadn't watched this film. I just
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah.
It's just like
Yes.
I dislike this movie, but
God.
not. But it's the story I dislike. It's the story.
I get it. Yeah, no.
And no disrespect to the people that made the film and acted in the film and what they're trying to do, but it's just not. That's not what I was looking for, and I really wish I hadn't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I have to pick a favorite scene, because that's what we do here, it's going to be when Agnes actually gets she confesses her sins and gets the forgiveness from the Lord, if you will, and her reaction to it, right? Her reaction to it, just it was such an interesting. That was like the one time that I thought everything was really interesting, because it was an interesting mix of relief and happiness, but complete madness at the same time. Like, she was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs at that time, but also at the same time that you saw, her whole, you saw the weight being lifted off her shoulders at the same time. So it was very complex and interesting and rich. The rest of the film was challenging. Although the scene that followed that Chris was talking about was, for horror fans, but it was weird. I didn't like this movie. I'm sorry to everybody involved, but I just
it's
really,
depressing. I get it. I know. I
this
think
movie.
this is why I would not recommend this film, because I don't think that's an abnormal reaction to this. This is super depressing.
This isn't one of those films where it's just it's so bad because it's just made bad or it's shot bad or anything. The main thing is, because you're sort of put in that time period where it's slow and just steady and long takes and stuff, you're sort of put in that specific time. And so, but I think because of the dreary and miserableness of these characters, I think that's the main thing that's going to turn most people off, is because it's such a dreary, miserable film. And some people like that. Some people like dreary, miserable films, and that maybe it might be up your alley. But for me, it's like sometimes I'm really affected by the story, and as someone that's dealt with my own like mental health issues and stuff, it's kind of hard. It can be triggering to some people. So just know that going into it. I mean, some people might actually like, oh man, this, like, people are into history and historical type events. They might find something totally different than we do. So that's a cool thing. It's like, even though I feel bad giving it sort of a lower rating than I would normally give certain things, it's still a well-made film. I mean, the cinematography is so well done. A lot of it's outside, which is kind of hard to shoot. And the acting, when you talked about that scene where she's trying to get absolution or get forgiven. Oh my God, it's one of the best performances ever, just in that one scene where she's just mainly looking up, and it doesn't cut between different shots. It's just looking at her, and it's like, oh man, you feel her
and the
pain.
shadow on her was really cool.
And you feel that moment where she's almost laughing, where she's kind of happy that she's, even though she's done this horrible thing, and it's got some really amazing acting in it, really well shot, but just the story is just like, you have to be in the right mood to watch this film without feeling like, man.
The scene where she's actually like, with the boy, that was too much for me. He's like, no, don't hurt me. I was like, F you, F you. Okay, like, the baby's one thing. It's just like the coffee table, very quick, not, you know what I mean? But that, I'm like, I do not ever think that harming children is ever going to be entertaining. And it will never be entertaining for me. I don't care I don't care if you put this in your movie as a historical element or whatever. That is not okay with me. That's where that's my line.
I guess that's it's sort of a long movie to prove the point that it's kind of sad when religion, you're so afraid because of your religion that you're willing to sacrifice a child or a kid just so you have that moment.
The most selfish thing in the world.
Ask for forgiveness. And that's kind of when your religion kind of makes you do that. That's the horror. That's a real life horror right there, where it makes you do horrible things for the sake of
absolution,
your God or whatever. So there
you go. So approach this one with caution. I still don't think it belongs on Shudder. I'm sorry.
Well, I think it gives a good variety of stuff. Not everything has to be the same.
I feel that way too. Yeah. I'm like, no, I still stand by the fact that I do think that this is horror. It's just It's a very specific genre of horror.
I mean, it is. I mean, it's barely folk horror, barely, just because of that last scene, barely. Or religious horror even. But I don't know. I mean, I probably could be convinced, but I'm struggling with that. But anyway, I think we've chatted about this one long enough. So let us know what you think of this film down below. You can tell me how wrong I am. I'm fine with it. I understand. There's going to be people that are going to be really pissed off for me not liking this movie. I'm pretty sure.
They're going to wish you had like a little hair in the back of your neck.
Well, that was, I almost picked that. That was interesting.
God,
that was really interesting.
Well, the barber, as they called him, where it was their doctor, and they had leeches and stuff, and they put
that was a little strange.
I was like, there's some horrific things that are actually. I'm assuming it's probably based on a real thing, which is even crazier.
Yeah.
Well, we know leeches was
definitely.
around forever.
So if you get a chance to see it, let us know.
Probably still find places that use leeches. To be honest with you.
Yeah, let us know what you thought about it. If you felt it was horror, if it's not horror, or what tell us what you thought about it, because I'm sure there's going to be varying opinions on this film. If you do, feel like watching it, just make sure you watch something like, Zucker Brothers or. Or something funny,
Psycho Gorman or something funny. Okay,
like
Shaun of the Dead or
wow, what an odd pairing that would be. Good guy.
Yeah.
Toxic Avenger.
Well, Crystal, Christopher, thank you for joining me. I wouldn't say it was a lot of fun, but this one
it was fun.
The discussion was fun.
As much fun we could have with this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get out of here. Let's say good night before I say something.
Good night.
Good night.
Gruesome Magazine.